And here we are. Happy Monday, everyone. It's great to be back again for another episode of Just Shilling. I hope that you all had a fantastic weekend. We have another incredible guest with Ella today from Molecule, and she is fresh off of holiday. So, everyone in the comments that's watching this live, give her big props for showing up and sharing
Thanks.
some really incredible information about this awesome company and that she worked for in this segment of the industry being DSI that many folks may not know about. And I'm really, really excited for her to share some really incredible insights. So before we do get into it, folks, first and foremost, nothing that we discuss today is ever going to be considered to be financial advice. The opinions that we share are of our own and do not necessarily represent our respective companies. And last but not least, if it's anything that's probably a little bit too spicy or controversial for a family dinner during the holiday, we'll avoid those topics here, but we are all adults and really, really super excited and grateful to have you here, Ella. So, welcome. And let's kick this off. Let's just give the folks in the audience about a 30-second minute elevator pitch about who you are and the awesome company that you represent.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. And not a problem that I'm here after my holiday. I would hope that it gives me a little bit more energy. But yes, I am Ella. I'm a scientific communicator. I actually come from a science background, not a crypto background at all. But I somehow found myself in the decentralized science space. And I now work with a company called Molecule, who is building the sort of technological rails that allow scientists to sort of get their research funded and progress it and build communities around the science, and generally sort of helping undo some of the bottlenecks we see in traditional academia.
Fantastic. I love that. Very succinct. So, let's get into it. Tell folks a little bit about your background because you mentioned before that you weren't always in this industry and this was an interesting transition. So can you give us a little bit of a backstory about first and foremost how you even stumbled into this industry?
Of course, of course. Yeah. So as I mentioned, I am a scientist by trade. I mean, by education, and a psychoms expert by trade. But I studied biochemistry at university. I then got my honors degree in material science. So sort of really, really science based, practical. Worked in a lab and quite quickly realized um, that it wasn't for me. And yeah, and so I kind of left it. I was like, cool. How do I keep my sort of closeness to science, and help people in science without actually having to be in the lab? Because as much as it's fun, I think, to be doing experiments, it like requires a very strict amount of sort of like repetition and rigor.
Yeah,
Um, and my ADD brain was like, I need to be doing a million things at once. So went into psychoms, and through a conversation with a mutual friend who worked in DSI, we sort of, I don't know, we were like, chatting over a drink at a bar, and I was lamenting um, academia and the industry in general. And he worked at Molecule and was like, well, why don't you like try writing a blog? And I was like, cool, this sounds interesting. But like, I mean, the most I know about crypto is that Bitcoin exists. And this was like 2.5 years ago. Um, wrote a blog, got sort of pilled, and was like, this is there's something here. Um, and have been around since, and now definitely know a lot more than there's just Bitcoin. But yeah, so kind of have that traditional science background, which I think helps a lot in general. In crypto, I think there's a lot of like sort of parallels that you can
Mm,
draw, especially with DeSci. So kind of, I don't know, right place, right time, as it tends to be.
yeah, for sure. And for those that aren't really familiar with, research, academia, science, what's the problems that molecule AG is trying to solve, and what's like some of the glaring just major problems that most people are just totally unaware of when it comes to even funding science?
100%. I mean, the scientific, like academic institutions as they stand right now are geriatric and lethargic, and not really incentivized to, really build progress. I think there's a lot of people that are just very comfortable with the way things are.
Mm,
Um, like, I think, I mean, two of my scariest stats, which I always will tell people, I bring them up often, is that like less than 2% of the NIH funding, which is sort of the big government funding body in the US, less than 2% of the yearly funding goes to researchers under the age of 35,
Wow.
which is, yeah, totally bizarre for me as a concept because, you have a good idea before you turn 35. um, and then also, like, in a parallel to that, Elsevier, which is like one of the biggest academic publishing journals, their profit margins are higher than Google's. So it's just like when you like lay down some of those facts, you're just like, okay, cool, something's not right here. And specifically where Molecule is trying to improve these processes is at this sort of early stage of research where
Mm,
research is coming out of academia. And that tends to be, there's a problem called the valley of death, which refers to sort of this gap between a researcher having an idea that's in a lab in a university and then getting that into a commercializable state. And generally, where sort of like VC people will come in or money will come in is generally once an idea is a little bit more formed.
mm,
Um, but what it means is that there's this really big gap where like ideas aren't able to like traverse the gap out of academia. And so, kind of where Molecule is situated is around that gap. And it's, I was going to say, we're tackling it from like many different prongs, I would say. But for example, we've built our IP NFT and IPT technology, which allows researchers to fundraise for their academic projects. So, sort of getting that money in. Um, there is our sister company, Bio, which started within us and then, kind of spun out because it was quite successful. But that's really about building communities around research and research projects, which is really cool. We've seen like sort of good examples of like a researcher being like, oh, I need some help sourcing a medicinal chemist, and then all of a sudden their community like swarms in and suggests someone. Um, and then more specifically, like what we've moved into now at Molecule is sort of creating an organizational layer for connecting people who are supporting the science to the scientists and the scientific updates, and that was sort of in our new release, which was Molecule Labs. But really, I mean, we also host DSci Berlin, which is a yearly conference in Berlin, which is really about community building. So molecules, it's, I mean, we're lucky in the sense that we've like been able to tap into like various different parts of the DSci ecosystem.
yeah,
But I would say our main thing that we're doing at the moment is our intellectual property token technology, which we built, and then of course Molecule Labs, which is like a platform for researchers so they can connect to their token community.
fantastic. And for you, was there ever this moment, maybe it was when you were in the lab, but that you recall that this traditional scientific system really wasn't designed to support, you know, groundbreaking breakthroughs? Was there anything that really pushed you to want to build beyond these kind of institutional barriers?
It is an interesting question. And I think personally for me, I've like, I studied and I was in the lab when I was studying and did 6 months working on a project there. Um, but I never sort of became a career academic. So I can't say that the issues were my own. But what I do absolutely recall seeing, and I still see it when I speak to researchers within the like sort of scope of my job now, is like hearing from people who have chosen it as their life path,
Mm,
have committed to it, and then just hearing really about like the poor quality of life, you know,
mm.
low pay, this sort of really big like competitive publish or perish sort of structure that exists.
And can you elaborate a little bit more into that, Ella? Because that's something that, when we chatted, it was very, revealing and eye-opening for me. So maybe help paint the picture for the life of what the typical researcher goes through.
Of course. So I mean, the way that researchers sort of um, are able to ascend, I guess, their career trajectory or become sort of develop in their career is that they have to publish papers. Their universities that they sort of get tenure at, which is essentially their employer, their boss, requires them to publish, requires them to be doing, research that's going to look good. What this does mean is that sometimes the scope of their work is pretty limited because
Mm,
it has to be like you have to look for what's going to be an easy publish rather than what's an interesting project. Um, and a lot of these young academics are also pitted against each other. It's like, okay, cool. If there's one permanent sort of tenure spot, they're all sort of taught to compete really against each other instead of like academia being a lot more sort of collaborative.
mm,
I mean, also there's like big siloing problem that you'll have like your physics department and your chemistry department and your sociology department and all of these sort of silos that are within the same institution, um, but not really linking together. And it's quite interesting because like a lot of these problems don't happen in isolation. Like the way disease sort of spread and managed like is biological, but it's also sociological. Like you know what I mean?
yeah,
A lot of complexity that gets, I think, removed because there are frameworks that exist that research has to happen within.
I like that. Thank you for sharing that. And, when it comes to your own view on scientific innovation, you know, changing, how is blockchain and decentralized models really impacting that and moving it forward?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, like I said, I was like completely new to blockchain, crypto, everything when I started. And so like the way I always try and explain it to like my old peers that like also have no science, like no blockchain knowledge, is I'm like, well, we're just essentially using the most powerful technology we have at our disposal. And like I also think like we'll get to a point where things will run and like people don't even know that it's blockchain under the hood. Like they're just using something that's useful to them and positive for them. And they don't even know that like, they're interacting with some sort of blockchain or Web3 sort of piping. Um, but I think there's a lot of interesting sort of tracks. I think a sort of tokenization allows intellectual property to be a lot more liquid, a lot more tradable, a lot more visible. Of course, the verifiability and traceability of blockchain also allows research data. It's not something like research data to be very discoverable and verifiable. It's not something that we work on specifically, but I was seeing this really interesting idea of essentially like porting like a laboratory instrument and just
Mm,
having it so, like if it's doing readings on like a cell count or something on a agar plate, just having those results piped directly on like online, and just having that data super super transparent and verifiable, like and just setting up that system. I thought that was a really interesting use case. Um, there's also some other like great DeSci projects. There's Research Hub, um, which is founded by the CEO of Coinbase, um, and they sort of look at proper incentivization for people to review peer review papers. Because again, this peer review system is so broken. Like, give me all day and I can speak about it. But additionally, so like on top of this like publish or perish paradigm that I was speaking about earlier, most researchers have to like pay to get their papers published. They also then review other people's papers for free, even though it is, a very sort of
mm,
it's very educated labor. You know what I mean? Like, and they are reviewing other people's papers for free. And Research Hub kind of turns this um, upside down and allows sort of reviewers to get rewarded in tokens and that sort of thing. So I think there's so much potential in like blockchain's reach in science. Um, and we as molecules sort of operate in one very small corner. So it's quite nice to sort of be involved in the bigger ecosystem.
yeah. And do you think that like these publishing pressures that you're alluding to, and maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on even like the grant model and how that's really kind of helping shape science traditionally, how it's been done? Do you think that there's intention for that to be done that way, or do you just think that like it's just always been done that way and there's really not been a better system or until now? Like, do you think that like it was unintentionally killing bold ideas from the start, or do you think that that was more intentional?
No, I wouldn't say it's intentional. I would say it's inept.
Mm,
Like, I don't think that I don't think that people see bold ideas and they shoot them down because they're like, "Oh, I'm afraid." But I think it's just that there's not a system set in place that allows those ideas to surface and to get, like, rolling. Um, yeah, and then maybe to, like, loop that into your question about grant models is that like, or grant frameworks is that generally, the decision process is pretty opaque.
mm,
People sort of have to spend heaps of time, or researchers have to spend heaps of time, like writing and drafting grant proposals to sort of get money to fund their research. Um, and I mean, I was speaking to a colleague as well who is an academic, and they waited like 6 months to hear back from a grant application, and the only
wow,
information they got back was no, sorry.
wow.
And they were kind of saying to me, they were just like, I don't even mind the no, but I just want to be clear on like what was the reason behind the no, because otherwise am I just going to keep like blindly running into a wall? Like was it a bad project, or was it just not the right project for the grant, or
Mm,
So I think yeah, the grant system is and it's obviously highly variable. I don't want to bash it entirely. A lot of science gets funded by sort of traditional grants. Um, but there's this also like there's a bit of complexity about like grants and then being commercialized as
mm.
well. It's like so I always like
Help me understand that a little bit more.
yeah, well, it's just like if something's government funded and then who gets to really reap the benefits if it is commercialized.
Uh, and
Yeah.
do I mean, and obviously too, right? I mean, not getting political, but I think that sometimes science can get politicized. So does that have an influence as well too, in terms of what is kind of the flavor of the month, if you will, or just like the kind of hot new thing, and maybe other things get pushed to the side, or
Mm.
is it kind of really I would say a pushback even too from some of the higher levels that might not be a popular thing, therefore the likelihood of it getting funded is even less.
Yeah. I mean, I think wherever there is a centralization of authority,
Yeah.
and that is
Okay.
run by people who are fallible and have their own beliefs and leanings, and there might be someone on the grant review board that deeply believes in, I don't know, brain augmentation, and then they want to lean into those projects a lot more. Um, so yeah, I think for me it's like maybe not a political issue, but it's a centralization issue,
Yep.
which is really where I mean decentralization comes in.
There we go.
It's
All full
and
circle.
everything falls into place, and it
Decentralized
all makes
decide. I
sense.
love it. I love it. I love
Exactly.
it. So, in terms of maybe something that people should understand more about the real cost of actually bringing a drug to market, like just help us quantify. And I've actually worked in biotech and pharma before, so I have a little bit of a background and I know how complex it is. So, but can you help break it down a little bit for us and the folks that are in the audience that may not have any idea of like the actual true cost of what it takes to get a drug from, point
Yeah.
A to the finish line?
Yeah, yeah, of course. I think something for me that I sort of only really started conceptualizing about the process of drug development was like the actual like what are all the steps of it, because obviously each step costs money, a lot of it, and that money sort of can just it rises exponentially. So like kind of the pipeline is one day researcher has an idea goes ping, um, or alternatively, they notice something in their lab and they go, something's happening here. I don't understand what it is, and I want to know more. They then will get grant funding, or university funding to pursue that idea. And that idea will develop and develop a little bit more until they've got a bit of data to support like what their hypothesis is. Um, and that can look like a number of different things. The sort of like the route in is pretty variable. But then what will happen is it'll get to the point where it is going to exceed grant money, or it's needs something like it's not getting enough grant money, and
Hmm.
then they'll reach out to sort of VCs or pharma companies, there's a lot of pharma companies that source from universities, like ideas from universities, and then they bring them in-house. And then what happens is, so you have this like early stage um, where the idea is really just being validated. And then you need to take it into sort of maybe animal models to sort of further validate the idea. But like testing an animal model gives you helpful like data points around your information, but it's not enough. It's not sufficient to then, give it to a person. So then what you do is you have to do then a lot of like sort of refining. So then it's like, okay, cool, we validated that this molecule works in animals. Um, but is it working as well as it can? And then you sort of
Mhm.
look at the molecule itself, but you have to improve the molecule. And all of these are different stages in the process. Um, and like I said, cost money and they cost like you need a lot of cross team collaboration because there's no one person who's can do medicinal biochemistry and biology and all of these sort of
I mean, are we talking, a couple of 100,000, millions, several million, or is that
yes,
really
yes, yes.
okay?
I think okay, yeah, yeah. I was gonna say I don't I everything I say also take with a grain of salt because this is the thing is every project is variable. So I don't
Yeah,
want to be like don't want to be too concrete. But I would say the projects that like sort of as they're coming out of university or like are in university, couple of 100,000
okay,
up to a couple of billion, but sort of sit there. And then when you really, so then once it sort of moves into a private company, and that IP or sort of molecule starts getting developed more, that's when you start to see a lot bigger ticket sizes. And like clinical trials is really
yeah,
where you start to see really, really, really big ticket sizes of 50 to 100 million. Um, and then ultimately, they say the cost of bringing a drug to market is over $1 billion. Um, but I think this number also is so like bringing a drug to market very difficult. Very discovering a drug, bringing a drug to market very difficult. And so this $1 billion sort of accounts for every one success. There might be like 99 failures. And
yeah,
this $1 billion to bring it to market accounts for all the sort of failures you have to have along the way.
interesting.
It's a tricky game to play, but it is also kind of the most essential game there is out there.
Yeah, for sure. So, when it comes to just the reception, because, this is very groundbreaking, obviously, what you and your team are doing. What's been the reception and how has it been received from scientists when they hear about molecule labs for the first time?
Um, positive, positive. I think it makes so much sense to them. Most of the researchers that we speak to, like, you don't have like you say there are issues in academia and science, and they go, yes. And they like, and I think what is quite nice, and this is also like another way I often describe the DeSci movement is that it's like inherently an experiment. Like, I mean, the DeSci space is young. I think the term DeSci was only coined sort of maybe like 2018 or 2020 even. Um, so it's really a young space. And so there's a lot of people that are building and coming up with these new ideas. I think we're starting to see some really like some stuff to like actually start to have traction and really make progress. I mean, last year we saw over $5 million worth of academic research funded via Molecules Protocol, like which is like just
Amazing.
sensational. I mean, in a small drop in the pond of how much science costs, but like really exciting that blockchain and crypto can do that for like really well established researchers and amazing universities. Um, so yeah, like on the ground, like researchers are very receptive. I think where it gets tricky is sometimes it's like cool, awesome, we are down with this idea, but then it's like okay, but can we trust the money if it's crypto? And
Mm,
then all of a sudden, these sort of like fears, I think, around crypto come in, which is totally fair because I think, crypto's got a very bad rap. When I first started working at Molecule, my mom was like, are you sure you're okay? Are you sure you're okay? And I
blink,
was like,
blink twice if you're okay.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And so I think that like often the blocker is like they will fully believe in the mission, they'll fully believe in the reasoning, they are just a little bit skeptical about like how crypto is involved. Um, but when you kind of, I think, lay it down for them. They're all intelligent people, and we've had a pretty warm reception, I'd say.
That's awesome. And in terms of, s- further speaking about just molecule labs, it's often called like the GitHub for science. So, was this was that like the original version, and how did this kind of shape your approach, kind of compared to the standard data dashboards?
Yeah. So I think like it's not a standard data dashboard in that the function of it is to really bring the community closer to the science and the scientists closer to their community. I think like at Molecule and at Bio, we've been building in DeSci now for 5 years or more, um, and started from really the ground up, and essentially have helped build these communities via Bio, and have built the technology that allows sort of the intellectual property to come on chain and tokenize it and allow people to participate with these tokens. But what we were missing was like the interface where they all connect. Like we
Yeah.
built in these little pods, and so I think Molecule's at a nice stage in its life as a company where it's like finally starting to like pull together all of these pieces and make it into like a beautiful package. Um, which because I think I mean in crypto, I think we're all so used to like MVPs of like build it and it's just basically you're trying to get it out to people as fast as you can. And luckily we're in the stage now where we're sort of pulling it all together. And like more and additionally more so than that, like it's a secure, decentralized data sort of platform for researchers, which as a service in itself is great for them.
And do you feel that, like, the researchers overall are kind of ready to become operators of their own communities? As you mentioned before, one of the beautiful things about this industry, for me, was that community aspect. So, and you just mentioned as well too, there's this disconnect. So, um, in addition to that first question, has any project, in the molecule ecosystem really kind of convinced you that decentralized science can truly, be a game changer?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two questions there that I want to answer, which is number one, do researchers want to be operators? And the answer is some of them do. And I think those are the people who are attracted to Molecule's model. When you say like you can build a community and you can connect and you can build this project, you get some researchers who are super entrepreneurial and they like see the their research living outside of their lab and living in the world and they want to sort of bring it to market and they're thinking about how to commercialize something. And then you get your researchers who are like, don't want to leave their lab, don't want to think about anything to do with the money and the financing and all of that sort of stuff. And so I think like Molecule's model attracts the first type, which is this really sort of entrepreneurial mind of like getting their research out into the public. And for that sake, they love this idea of a community. It's like really, it's like early vetting for your idea. Like like if you don't know if anyone's going to care about your idea, why not start a community and see, you
Yeah.
know? Um, and then the second question was, oh, I'm now forgotten the second question.
No, like have there been any projects that you've seen
Ah,
personally within the ecosystem for Molecule, when you really said, "Wow, like this decentralized science is going to be a game changer"?
yes. Yes, I have. They just sent out a project update via Molecule Labs last week, but it's the team over at Vita RNA, which is a longevity project. Sorry, I keep itching. I've got all my itchy bites from my holiday, so
It's
I hope you
okay, no worries.
I'm like so conscious of the fact that I keep fidgeting. Um, but it is run by a researcher named Michael Torres. Michael Torres, who has been the CEO of his own company, has spun out projects before. So really, as I said, came in with that entrepreneurial mindset. And the project was first funded by VitaDAO, which is a longevity DAO. It's probably one of the most well-known bio DAOs in the space. Um, and then, yeah, they got positive data and they wanted to develop the project more. And so they did their first initial fundraise using Molecules sort of tokenization technology, raised a bunch of money. I think it was like 70K. Um, And then, yeah, more positive data. Did another fundraise for about 350, I think. I would need to double check those amounts. But yeah, they have an active community. They have a Telegram chat. Michael is really good. Like he definitely has come into it with the right mindset and is super communicative with his community. Um, and he's very active on Twitter and is able to sort of really, I think, bridge that gap into the crypto world, and has done it with like a lot of openness, and it's, yeah, really great to see. And they've just released a new update on our molecule platform. They've just partnered with a new biotech firm to help their sort of drug delivery for this. Their molecule is essentially, it's looking at these things called nonsense mutations in our DNA, which are it's quite a nice name, I think, but it's essentially like in your DNA code, sometimes you'll have one letter that just changes randomly, and it creates a mutation. It's called a nonsense mutation. And so, what their molecule is looking to do is to fix these random mutations, and that
Mm,
increase the longevity of a cell. I'm being very reductive here, but
yeah.
that's what they're working on.
Wow, that's
Um,
really cool.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's very cool stuff.
So,
Um,
in this industry, one of the things, Ella, that's really, was eye-opening for me was that, traditional roles, they tended to change. You found that people that were traditionally doing one set of things or had one particular skill set, like in TradFi, you know, it's completely different in DeFi. For me, I never considered myself to even be hosting podcast or doing this kind of thing, but this is something that is needed for the educational aspect. And I think that if you're not doing this kind of content, then you're being left behind. And you definitely have to be very, I would say, entrepreneurial and kind of being able to kind of self fund yourself at times, even. So, do you feel that even though this is still relatively new overall, that once this starts to get traction, it's going to force people to kind of get more out of their comfort zone, and the ones that choose to kind of stay in the times of old will get left behind, while the people that are a little bit more forward thinking and vulnerable and being more adaptive are going to kind of get a head start?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the truth of life. I think
Mm,
that's in most areas, people like being resistant to change or skeptical of change to an unhealthy degree makes you miss out on a lot of things, and lose out on some of the like most amazing tools that you could have. I mean, AI in and of itself has changed the face of the world as we know it, and especially science. Um, and sorry, can you hear the kids screaming in the background?
it's okay. No worries. We're all good.
It's lovely, lovely German living. We're all on top of each other.
So you were speaking about AI, and that was actually a really great transition because I was going to bring this up. What role do you see with AI playing in scientific, discovery alongside these decentralized platforms? And maybe even the next one is because you had brought this up, and this is another really great part about this industry. I feel that it's more collaborative than combative. So maybe even talk a little bit about that, paired with the combination of AI and then these decentralized platforms all coming together.
Yeah, of course. What a nice question. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think DeSci is super collaborative. It's one of the sort of hallmarks that is really, really driven into everyone who's getting here. And I think that's also one of those nice opportunities where, as you were saying, people's skills are like all of a sudden they change and they morph. And it's really because I think everything's almost operating from that startup mindset of like there's a gap that needs to be filled, and so someone's got to fill it, so I'll try fill it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it challenges people to diversify. And I think AI. I'm sure your audience is the right target to understand the importance of AI and the potential it brings. Specifically, I mean, I know within the DeSci space, we're leaning a lot into like AI agents, which are essentially like smart agentic sort of helpers that help researchers scan through masses of research. Um, and there's been some really cool stuff that's popping out, like the biohackathon. They just had a young research team who built an agent that was essentially reading and digesting the texts, like ancient manuscripts of spine research to help Spine
Amazing.
DAO, which is one of the DAOs, and it's a DAO that looks at spine health and spine research. And they had these two young developers that were just going through, they were based in India and like going through India and scanning ancient texts and having this AI agent,
Wow.
learn from them, which is just like, I mean, isn't that powerful?
It's insane.
um, so yeah, I mean, I see a future where humans and agents are collaborating, building science, building DAOs. I think it's. I mean, I'm obviously very very biased, but I do think it is the future.
Yeah, I think so too, for sure. So I want to leave the last few minutes here. This has been extremely insightful, Ella. Thank you for sharing everything so far. But I really want just to leave some time here for you to talk a little bit more about, what Molecule is up to in terms of like the roadmap, anything that you obviously can share and that is not private information. But tell us about what some cool things that you guys are working on, what's coming up in the pipeline, and also to ways that people here, if they're interested in learning a little bit more, where can they go to feed themselves with that?
Of course, of course. Thank you so much. Where to even start? I think I think our New Molecule Labs platform is probably a good thing to check out. So if you navigate to our website, which is molecule.xyz, you can sort of look through the active tokens of the academic projects, the research projects that have come out of the DeSci space. If you open each one of them up, you can see their trading activity, and you can also see like what the science is and if they've got any updates. So like open up
Cool.
if you want to like for example Vita RNA, you'll be able to see their sort of press release and see the deck of their like latest data update and that sort of thing. I will also say that the AI agent talk can be considered a bit of a hint. No, nothing official announced yet, but that could be a bit of a hint. Um, but yeah, I mean, we are active on X molecule underscore DAO, and of course, LinkedIn. Contact me on LinkedIn, on Twitter, anywhere. I'd be happy to chat. I'd be happy to just talk about DeSci in general. We just ran at Molecule. We just ran a DeSci education course, um, and so I'm well versed in chatting about DeSci at the moment. So yeah, always happy to onboard anyone who's interested.
And tell us a little bit more about just the team dynamics, right? Tell us a little bit about the size of your team. Are you guys growing? Are you a remote team? What's it like working there?
Of course, we are a growing team. So at the end of last year, both CZ and Vitalik attended a very intimate DSI event that was run by the bio team, and it kind of kicked off this DSI storm. Um, and so yeah, coming off the back of that, we've grown a lot as a team. We're building a lot. We have a big tech team, a tech and engineering team, of course, because we are, first and foremost, a tech company. But we have a lot of scientists and academics um, on our staff as well. Actually, we were having a rather nice conversation on our on Discord the other day where someone was one of staff members was like, I'm looking to get feedback from people who've done the peer review process, who works at Molecule and has published peer reviewed articles. And about 8 people were like, yeah, me, I've done it. And everyone was like, this is so cool that we work at a company with like so many established academics. But yeah, so we have like a biotech slash partnerships team. We're about, I think, 30 people at the moment. We're
Nice.
hiring, we've got open roles. We've got a careers page on our molecule.xyz website. So if you're interested, go and check it out. I think we see a lot of people coming through from crypto that are kind of maybe a little bit jaded and feeling a little bit worn down by
Mm,
some of the, grift that can happen in crypto.
yeah.
And we see a lot of people that come to DeSci and come to Molecule as like a sort of coming home of like, yes, I can see the sort of real world application and the functionality. Um, And then we also have like from the other side of academics coming that are going like, I'm just, I need another path.
I love that. And lastly, if this decentralized science really does succeed, where do you really see this in terms of just not for the future of research, but overall for science in like the next 5 to 10 years?
Not if it's gonna work, it will work.
Ah, yes.
Um, it's so hard. It's so hard. I think with the way that technology is moving at like breakneck pace, like I find it really hard to vision cast along the lines of like what's technologically capable. Um, However, what I do know is that I think it will be. I'm really excited to decide, like for decide to permeate a little bit more internationally.
Ah,
It
okay.
sort of really has been existing in the European and the US markets. But I, as a South African, would love to see it sort of go into Asia, Africa, and broaden its scope and help researchers really, really across the globe and like realize that full decentralization goal. And I hope to see, um, hopefully sooner than the next 10 years, but also some of the first like real clinical trials and medications reaching the market that have come up the DSI pipeline. Because bringing a drug to market can sort of take between sort of 10 to 15 years. It's not a quick thing.
Mm.
So some of these projects now have been running for, 2, 3 years. So I'd be really, really excited to see like those projects being actualized and hitting the market. I think
Yeah,
that'll be
I
our
mean,
biggest point.
what do you think just people in general, right? Maybe people that are listening here in the audience that are just, other people in the crypto community, like what can we do collectively to make this more mainstream? And like what are some of the biggest, I mean, even like obstacles or hurdles to even make that like achieve that in the first place?
I think just awareness. I always say, speak about DeSci at your next dinner party. Lean over to your friend and say, like, "Do you know they're trying to fix science with crypto? Like, isn't that crazy?" Like, just I think getting the word out. DeSci is still small. I think we have about 60,000 wallets that hold DeSci tokens. So, it's very young.
Super
Um,
early. I like that.
it's
Good.
I mean, it's growing. It's growing quickly. Um, but I think reaching into obviously we want a crypto audience, and sort of the people who know the tech, but like I also want people to be onboarded that have never worked with crypto before. Like they don't need to,
Yeah.
you know, you know what I mean? Like come and join the space because you fundamentally agree with the vision of it. And like we can figure out the rest. You don't know how to make a wallet, we can help you make a wallet, you know.
These
But
things
really,
can be
really
done.
like getting it into sort of the minds of the people who will be able to build it more.
Fantastic. Well, our time is up here, Ella. Thank you so, so much. I think that this was a really insightful conversation. I've learned a lot. I will continue to do my research and learn more about DeSci. I actually learned about DeSci. I heard about it, but really started to understand the capabilities. I actually had a podcast with Caspar from Amino Chain, and then I was just like, wow, like this is absolutely insane. And then I learned about Molecule. I was just like, what is going on here? And it's just really beautiful that there is this side to the industry that is doing so much, right? And really solving these problems and giving opportunities to people that otherwise would never have those opportunities. And as you mentioned before, connecting these different communities, right? So, you're going to have like maybe the DGen community will start to pay a little bit respect for what's kind of going on in the D side community and vice versa, right? So we're all in this together, folks. But thank you so much for your time. I hope that everyone had a great time listening to this. And if you did not catch this live today, we'll get these up on social media platforms. We'll do some short clips and get that up on LinkedIn and X. And then also we'll get that full video up on YouTube in the near future. But really, really thank you all for joining us today. You can be anywhere in the world, but you chose to be here, and especially on this beautiful Monday. So have a great day. Thank you again, Ella. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.